Hi, everyone. Dr. Tim and another Dr. Tim's Aquatics podcast. And today we're going to change it up a little bit. We have Thomas Berchery from ASF, Aquarium Systems France, Dale Lewis from the UK, works for both Reptile Systems and ASF. What we're going to do is we're going to have a single subject. We are going to talk about salt. Thomas' family has been making salt since 1981.
Yeah, a long time.
Long time. Before he was born.
Yeah.
And so we're going to, it's a fascinating subject. There's a lot of science and art behind it. And so let's get started. Thomas, why don't you give us a quick introduction to ASF and talk to us about salt?
I think Aquarium Systems is a known name in the US. Originally, it was a US company that was founded in 1964 to produce projects that were public aquarium, like the Niagara Falls aquariums, Mystic aquariums. And when they make these aquariums, they realize that most of the times, how do you make seawater? So if you look the shed in Chicago, they were bringing trains of seawater directly from New York, I guess, or Boston, I don't know.
And no, it was the Gulf Coast. They sent, refurbished oil tanker cars on trains down to the Gulf of Mexico, filled them up. Yeah.
Okay. And so Aquarium Systems at that time realized, okay, we need to do something else. Of course, it's easier to ship I would say a box of salt this size compared to a cubic meter worth of seawater. So that's how they developed the first commercially available sea salt on the market, known as Instant Ocean, that everybody knows and still use today. So my dad imported Instant Ocean in the 70s. And in the early 1980s, they start making the salt production in France. So the F is for Aquarium Systems France, because that's where we're based. And since then, we're making Instant Ocean, Reef Crystals, and now since 3 years, now we make the Reef Evolution salt in France. So we are situated nearby mountains, the Vosges Mountains in France, which could sound strange, why you make salt near mountains and not being on the seaside. And the story is quite easy to understand. 200 million years ago, where we are was named the Germanicus Sea, and with the movement of the Earth, of course, it starts to be a big lake and then dries up, and that means the underground of where we are situated is very rich in raw materials that we can use to produce sea salt.
Literally, you're on top of salt mines.
Yeah, correct. There is a big salt dome that starts right after Paris, and that goes up to the Netherlands. So quite big. And we are literally in the middle of it. So depending on how deep you are digging, you can find sodium chloride, you can find magnesium, you can find calcium, potassium, because all of the elements are going to, when you dry, they dry at a separate level. And that's where we are situated. So that means all the raw materials we use to make our salts, whether it's Instant Ocean, Reef Evolution, comes from 200 million years ago. So there is no pollution, no oil leakage, no microplastic, nothing compared to the raw materials we could get if we were using evaporative seawater. So that means you take seawater, you evaporate, and then you take the ingredients that are from the sea.
This may sound a silly question. How are you getting these raw materials to the surface?
Well, it's not a silly question. So we don't use diggers. We don't use big engines or whatever. what is done, so you have a big drill that makes a hole into the layer of which material you are looking for. So for example, sodium is going to be about 70 to 80 meters. If you look for potassium, it's going to be 700 meters, something like this. And then we are going to inject water into this hole. It will dissolve the raw materials, and then we pump up the solution, which is going to be dried using big dryer, and then you have pure raw materials that are out of the ground, 100% pure, free of pollution, and then we can use these raw materials into our production.
How deep is this salt dome, or how tall?
Well, it depends. For sodium chloride, it's going to be at least 50 meters, I would say, 50 to 100 meters for sodium chloride.
Yeah.
And then depending on the materials, you go deeper.
Right. So what people don't, if you didn't know, sea salt has all these materials, but as it starts to evaporate, as Thomas said, different chemicals are precipitating out and being deposited as the water evaporates. It doesn't all evaporate at the same rate. You get a stratification of chemicals.
Yeah, correct. Because you have the saturation of the chemicals, which if you look at the periodic table, you can find out, and you can see that's why, for example, in seawater, you have more chloride, for example, compared to calcium or magnesium, which is less.
Yeah.
Because it does not concentrate at the same rate.
So the first benefit from the salts coming from ASF is, as you said many times, there's no pollution. It's not exposed to industrial waste and smog and wind and birds and animals, and long ago, any diatoms or dinoflagellates or bacteria and all that, they're dead and gone. So it's very clean. It's
extremely clean. And by using this also, we have raw materials that are easy to that's never easy, but that are easier to use because the concentration is going to be more flat, which means when we make our sea salt into the production room, we have to adjust the formula from time to time, so that once in solution, when you take, for example, 40 grams per liter of arrow water, the solution you're going to get is going to be the same from January 1st to December 30, for example.
Yeah.
So you will have consistency in the batch, whatever the batch number you have in your bucket, the solution you get is going to be the same.
Yeah. So then you get in all these different compounds, 13 or 14 different chemicals. And a big difference is that you grind them or something so that the size is all the same. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. So when you get raw materials, like we said, you can have fine powder, for example, or you can have flakes. So depending on the chemicals that have been dried out, you have a different format. Of course, we cannot mix a big chunk of sodium chloride with a flake of magnesium and a pellet of calcium, for example. Because if you do so, when you are going to make the bucket traveler, or when you have the salt traveling, you are going to have separation, which is not what you want, because we are rarely using the full dosage of salt in one go. So what our job is to do is to make these raw materials compatible in between each other without changing the chemical form of each material. So once it's in solution, you have the same and the perfect product each and every time. So that means, yes, we have to grind, for example, the flakes, you have to grind them. But be careful, if you grind them and you warm them too much, you might create insolubles, for example. And if it's not sufficiently grind, it doesn't mix well. So you really need to fine tune and find the right balance. And that's where now we have over 40 years of experience in France. And before the French factory was set up, we had another 20 years of experience of the US operation that was there. So we were refining, and we are still refining the method of making sea salt. I mean, I know that, Tim, you visited one of the early factory we had in France, 25 years ago? And you visited us, 6 months ago? And I think you can say there is nothing similar to what was in the past. It has changed completely, because we believe in the Kaizen method. So that's my dad is really focused on this. So every single day you can make something better, and it's a small step-by-step process. Well, we're not going to make a big leap we make a big leap on how we make salt, but every single day we find something that can be better, can be made better, can make the products better, and we evolve. So of course the sea salt is, we always have the best quality available, but we try to make it better. So better, not in terms of solution, one thing solution, but sometimes better in terms of manufacturing with less energy, being greener, having less waste, for example. So all of this, we need to look at the full circle of life of the sea salt. It's not only what you have in the bucket and what you put in your tank. There is a life before, so how you get the raw materials, the way you treat the raw materials, the way you use the waste, and the way you manufacture, because when you manufacture, you use energy. So of course, we try to have the less impact on the environment, and the best is to be low impact for everything, packaging wise, everything, machine wise. So it's a big process, and every day we try to be better.
Yeah, but
so go on.
No, but even in the evolution of making sea salt, originally it was, everybody wanted reagent grade chemicals. It was very pure. There weren't any organics. Everything was inorganic, the calcium chloride, the sodium chloride. And that's fine up to a point when people were just keeping maybe fish only. But as the hobby progressed and we started keeping, hard corals, soft corals, SPS and all that, we found out, when you think about it, it makes sense. The ocean has got lots of life and organics in it. And that's where the formula has changed. And as we learn and get more experience keeping the animals, and your dad was one of the first to breed clownfish, in raising those, that's where the formula has changed. Like, talk about Reef Evolution and how that's different from, say, Instant Ocean, which you make for the rest of the world. But Reef Evolution is, well, as the name says, it's kind of evolved to be a salt for fish only tanks, but also for coral tanks. It's kind of the best of both worlds, could you say?
Yeah, I agree with you. It's best of both worlds. We learn how to use some new chemicals, and thanks to research, like your research on bacteria, we know now the importance of bacteria in tanks. So of course, when you make a water change with Reef Evolution, why not, when we talked about this, why not putting a food for bacteria, which is what we say the carbon source, which is inside. It's an organic carbon that will help to feed the bacteria, and then the bacteria are going to develop and do the purpose of whatever they were intended to do. So I don't know, for example, consuming a nitrate or phosphates, and also that helps. In a way, it's quite strange to hear, but feeding the bacteria is going to help to control the nutrient level of your tank.
Yeah, that
sounds
what
weird,
I preach.
But it's the reality. You have to feed the bacteria for that.
Well, it's what I preach all the time here. The water's too clean. People have the skimmers, the roller filters, the UV, the ozone, and we're sterilizing the water, which is, one, bad for the corals, but none of those processes get rid of the phosphates and nitrates that are the natural byproducts of the tank. So you're putting light and nutrients, but eliminating bacteria in the water column. You're going to get algae and cyano and dinos and stuff like that. So we can help with that with a better salt, with a salt that can feed the bacteria, because corals filter feed 24/7. And what are they filter feeding? They're filter feeding bacteria out of seawater. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, when you do a water change with Reef Evolution, we have one of our sales guys say it's like making a breeze in the aquarium. So that means you throw inside new water with all of this, and you can see the next day some effect on your corals. That it's like if they had a breeze of fresh air. You know, they start to be bigger. Because they have more food, because the bacteria have developed, and they can finally have something to eat again.
Right.
So it's very important for that to, like you said, not to have a too clean tank.
Yeah, Instant Ocean has a calcium magnesium level that would match seawater, because reef crystals had elevated calcium and magnesium.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then Reef Evolution is kind of right in the middle, because like anything else, some people say you got to have high calcium, magnesium, super high, and super high alkalinity, 12 or 13. And others are like, no, you want it low. But with Reef Evolution, we're kind of in the middle, and then people can adjust with reef shots, which is a whole nother subject, and things like that to tweak the tank to what they want. That correct?
I mean, Instant Ocean was intended to breed fish. It was the first sea salt that, once in solution, when you breed marine fishes, they keep the same colors as in the nature. It was the first one. There was a hatchery in Florida where they bred millions of clownfishes, and this was very interesting. But yeah, when there is the start of the reef being coming up, then we realized, okay, Instant Ocean can work for corals, no problem at all. But then you need to add and to supplement calcium, magnesium, strontium. You need to add some trace element, because the corals need them. Otherwise, you need to add them all the time. And it depends what type of hobbyist you are. Either you want to do it every day in your tank, or you have pumps, or you can use a salt which has everything in it. And Reef Crystals was made for this. And if I could say so, Reef Evolution is an evolution of Reef Crystals in a way, because we have learned about all the biological process of bacteria. So we had this food source for bacteria, and we had the amino acids, because now we found out that these amino acids can be used by corals to grow and to make the mucus and to improve the marine life of your tank.
Yeah, I mean, obviously salt's super critical, because without salt, you can't keep your aquarium, you can't keep your corals, and you can't keep fish. So it's something that has evolved over time as there's more and more knowledge. And that's how you could contrast it. You've done that a little bit. There's evaporative salts out there where they just take seawater that's open to shallow ponds, it evaporates, and they basically take bulldozers and they harvest it and dry it, and
that's how they got some of the materials there.
Yeah, because Reef Evolution, so all salts, or correct me if I'm wrong here, all salts have a certain amount of water, because if you have an anhydrous, meaning a dried salt, which people have tried because water adds weight, but a dried salt can actually have some drawbacks to you as a consumer, with getting it on you, and it heats up.
Yeah.
Can you explain that a little bit?
The trouble is when you have an anhydrous product, that means the raw materials exist, and basically they eat a lot these raw materials to take away the water content.
The moisture,
the moisture. And the trouble is when you put back this into water, it creates an exothermic reaction. First of all, you can hear it when you put in the water. It can make a psh, because it warms up.
Yeah.
But also there is another drawback, is when you eat too much. Like we said, when you grind or when you modify the raw materials, you can create insoluble. And that's one of the main issue of using only an anhydrous product. First, it's very costly, extremely costly, not only in dollar, but also for the environment. I mean, in terms of CO2, for example, because in Europe we are maybe more conscious compared to the US about CO2 problems. But all of this creates a salt that, okay, it might dissolve, but it doesn't age well, because we tried several formula, doesn't age well, and you have at the end of the day you have insoluble, which you don't want, even though the insoluble could be taken by the filters, but it's not what you want. It doesn't make a nicely clear water all the time.
Right.
And of course, I agree with you. The water content of a salt is important, because you don't want to pay for water. So you have what we call wet salt. You do have in the market wet salt,
right,
where they have 25 to 30% moisture content.
By weight. So
by weight,
1 pound of salt or 40 grams, 12 to 15 of that's water.
Yeah. Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And if you look a salt like Reef Evolution, it's going to be 15% moisture content. And we could go lower, but then it becomes harder. And the main ingredients that cause this problem is going to be magnesium, because you can have magnesium under several formats. You can have chloride, you can have sulfate. And of course, depending on what you do, you can unbalance the solution. So the water can turn cloudy very quickly. You can have issue when you make the water change. So yeah, frankly speaking, we try to improve. But I would say between 10 to 15% is what's going to stay there. Otherwise, the price doesn't justify. It won't justify in terms of costings as well.
Well, and as you said, because as the salt sits around, especially anhydrous, it's taking moisture out of the air, and it's becoming harder and harder. So
even
really
quicker.
Yeah. So, so we talk about calcium and magnesium. Then those are important for corals. That's why we have test kits and people measure it, because as the corals are building their the structure, the reef, they're removing the calcium and magnesium from the water.
Right.
Yeah. But
they use this, and also you need the proper strontium content, because basically you have bricks made of calcium and magnesium, and the ceiling in between is going to be made with the strontium. If I can make a
yeah,
to ease the explanation.
No, it's the glue holding everything together.
Yeah.
So these are important elements, but to do so, corals still needs to have energy. So they need to have food, and they need to have also vitamins, that can help to accelerate all the process. I don't know. For example, if you take B complex vitamins that you have in Reef Evolution, it will help tissues to repair. It will help enzymatic functions to make them faster, so you have a better growth. If you use vitamin C, for example, it's going to help the collagen synthesis, and so all of this put together is going to help your reef to be healthier and to grow faster.
Now, let's talk about mixing, because a lot of people equate that if my salt mixes clear super fast, that's a good salt. But that's actually wrong, because the quickest thing to mix is just sodium chloride, and sodium chloride is not anything that you're going to keep your fish and corals in, right?
There is not a right answer to this, because in a way they are right that a fast dissolving salt is a proof of quality, and only if you make a test of everything that all the parameters are correct. In that case, yes, it's a sign. Because as you said, you could have only sodium chloride, then you have no magnesium, no calcium. The worst, I would say the worst element to mix is calcium. That's a pain to mix properly. And yeah, so that means if it's dissolved fast, maybe there is no calcium. But in the case of a great salt, like this one here, you will have all the right levels and it dissolves fast. I mean, Reef Evolution is intended to be used within 5 to 10 minutes. I mean, once you dissolve, the pH is going to be reached very quickly, and then you can make a water change. And I would advise to do in that way. Once you have dissolved the salt, make your water change, because, for example, the element you have inside, like vitamins, if you let them sitting with oxygen or whatever, is going to oxidize, and then you don't have vitamins anymore. So make your water change quickly.
So it really doesn't help in action, and maybe it's bad to mix up and let the salt sit in a bucket or a large can for a week. You shouldn't do that.
No. With a good salt, you don't need.
Yeah.
Some of our competitors needs this because the pH is not going to be rich, but we use buffers that helps to get the pH right very fast. So, for example, what I do personally is I have a bucket of salt next to my tank, and I have the mixing tank always full with RO water. And when I want to do my water change, I just prepare everything with the pump. When it's clear, I just make the change. Because I know all the elements that are in the salt are going to be put in the aquarium straight away and without any oxidation. Because, yeah, if you aerate, I don't know, one of our competitors says you need to aerate 48 to 36 hours minimum or to have the solution clear. Yeah, then everything that is inside is going to have oxidoreduction. So it's going to be oxidized, which is maybe not what you really want to put in your tank.
Right. And when you're comparing salts, you have to actually look at what the salinity, because some companies play games, and you got to be apples to apples. Bring it up to 33 to 34 parts per thousand. And then how long does that take? What's the calcium and magnesium? Don't just believe what's on the box, because in the fine print, it may be, I know in Reef Evolution, there's a chart. If you at this salinity, this is the calcium, magnesium, strontium. If you're at a higher salinity, because maybe you want to do Red Sea or whatever you want, you give the number so that people understand. And then when you're doing testing, comparing salts.
And it's pure math. So if you add more salt, everything is going to increase the same amount.
Right.
So if you want higher KH, you can have a higher salinity, for example. You're going to have, if you put less salt, your KH is going to be lower because calcium is going to be lower, magnesium is going to be lower. So depending on which species you have or which species you get, you can change the salinity. And also by doing tests, we know that depending on the salinity, you can have, for example, for fishes, if you want them to grow fast, have a lower salinity. They will grow faster, but they get older faster and they die faster in that way because the organism is going to be much more active. So we have very good record of longevity in instant ocean. For example, in Europe, Reef Evolution would be the same, but at a higher salinity. So yeah, 34, 35 parts per thousand. Usually with this, you can keep everything, corals, fish, shrimp. You have the right osmotic pressure so that they can change the shelf. So that's a good norm to fit. But you can change, you can adapt, and fish will adapt. I don't know if you remember, Tim. I think we met one day in Singapore. We had an aquarium where they mix freshwater fish with marine water fish.
Yeah.
Basically, they just adapt the salinity. So it was what was 25,
20, yeah,
24.
something like that.
Yeah. And so you had the freshwater fish with marine water fish. Was very weird for me to see.
Yeah, it didn't look right.
No, right.
It's not right. Yeah.
No.
But that's one of the,
you can adapt.
Yeah. And that's same with the nitrifying bacteria. What I tell people is lower the salinity when you're first cycling, because the nitrifiers will grow fast. Now, some people I know with Reef Evolution, they'll open it and they'll say, "Oh, there's a scent to a smell to it," and that's the vitamins.
Yeah, you have the vitamins and the carbon source. So, funny enough, we have one of our customers in Japan says that the Reef Evolution salt smells nuts, smells like nuts, a little bit sweety, and that's due to the carbon source. If you open the bucket of reef crystals, it's gonna smell much stronger because of the vitamins in it. But Reef Evolution, you will have also a stronger smell of the vitamins in it, but you also have the carbon source, which has a specific taste. But it's not wrong. I mean, that's correct.
No, it's just different.
It's due to the ingredients that are inside. Yeah.
And that's one thing if people, because, unfortunately there are companies out there that say they add all these great things, amino acids and stuff, but you should be able to smell that,
yeah, correct.
Yeah.
I mean, when you make your vitamins in the morning, when you put pills of vitamins, it has a smell, it has a color, and it has a smell.
Yeah.
And that means, for example, if you use a salt like Reef Evolution, let's take this as an example, and if you add lots of salt because you want to make precipitates, it will create calcium carbonate, and the calcium carbonate you're going to create is going to be not white, it's going to be a little bit brownish, because when it precipitates, it takes some of these elements like vitamins, amino acids, and that's why it's not going to be white anymore.
Yeah.
White means purity, but in that case, not in the right way. It means purity because you have nothing in your salt. If you have something in your salt, you might have some colors. I don't speak about having how you say this in English? I forgot now. Some brownish mud or something. No, I just speak if you get calcium carbonate and you mix, it's not going to be fully white because of the trace element and the ingredients you have in Reef Evolution.
Well,
you're talking about like some salts can leave a sludge, like
a ring around the bucket,
brown slime around the inside of the container.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah,
correct.
Right.
Correct. And it's very easy to see what it is. If you put some white vinegar, or if you put chlorhydric acid, if it makes bubbles, it's calcium carbonate, and 9 times out of 10, it's going to be this.
Okay. So without getting into too much detail, because we've got about another 10 minutes, 12 minutes, what about testing? You mentioned earlier, sometimes you have to adjust the formula. So how often and what kind of testing do you guys do before the salt leaves the factory?
So every single day, every single formula that we are making, we are taking samples that we bring to our internal lab, and we are going to test 10, 12 different things. For example, the very first test is a dissolution test. So we need to we take 1.5 liters of water, so a bit less than half a gallon, in which we put all the times 57 grams of salt. So we reach 33 parts per thousand. So that's our norm. And then by doing this, after 2 minutes, we need to have 1 meter of visibility. So we have a big plastic tubes with inside like a plastic piece, which is white and black.
The Sankey disc.
Yeah, and you need to have 1 meter of visibility. If you don't, it's not good. It means we don't have the right salt, or there is maybe something wrong in the salt. That's 2 minutes normally, and then we continue up to 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, we are going to start testing the pH, and the pH at that time need to be between 8.25 to 8.4. So that's why we said after 5 minutes you can make a water change, because the pH is rich.
Right. A lot of salts, when you first mix, the pH is quite low and it stays there, right?
Yeah, and it's due to oxidation that is going to, that's why they said you need to aerate them for, 36, 48 hours to reach the pH that you want. And that's one of the big advantages that you have with our salts, is that you can make a water change quick because the pH is rich. So that's the very basic test. Then we test all the major elements. That means calcium, magnesium, strontium. We test if there is phosphate, nitrate, ammoniac. All of this is going to be tested. We do not test if there is or not the trace element, but in our manufacturing process, you cannot miss them. You have to have them inside. You cannot miss them. And so to test the trace element, every few weeks, we take samples of the production, we make the internal test, and then we send to an independent lab to double check our test.
Yeah, but people shouldn't get so hung up, because everybody now wants to test with ICP, but then that's a whole another subject, which people
that's
know
a big rabbit hole. Very
we should do one
hole.
just on water testing alone.
Yeah. That's another another hour we'll spend or two on that.
So to be clear with this, and I'm going to go very quickly. So when we send to the independent the test laboratory, so we use a laboratory which is accredited by the French Custom Office. So that means every time they want to test seawater to see if people can swim in it, if it's not dangerous, they have a specific lab, and that's where we test. So there is an accreditation, which the name is COFRAC, and that's where we send. But even them, they said, oh, testing seawater is complicated. And whatever result you get, whatever result you get, you can add or take out 10%.
Yeah.
And if you use this, if you take or add 10%, we won't say a word because that's the minimum zone that we have. So it's very weird. And it's not an ICP test that costs $50.
No.
It costs more
Hundreds.
like €300 to €400, so $500, and that's the answer we got from the guy.
Yeah, we'll talk about testing in another session because there's a lot to learn, and it's not as cut and dried as people think. So we'll leave it at that for now. But
that means. But in any case, that means every day we make tests of the formula that we are making, even though we should not do it, to be frank, because when we have a batch of raw materials, we don't speak about a batch of 600 kilograms or a ton. For example, when we buy a batch of magnesium, the batch itself is 400 tons. So for 400 tons...
400 tons, folks, that's 400 times 2,000 pounds. That's 80,000.
Yeah, 800,000.
80,000 pounds. I do that right?
Yeah, that's when they manufacture, because the
800,000.
800,000. Yeah, the supplier that we have is selected the magnesium for us because they want to check that there is no ammonia in it. That it's extra white because we want extra white raw materials. But we know that whatever you take, whichever super bags you take within this 400 tons, is the same materials. It's the same manufacturing time. So frankly speaking, by that time, all of the raw materials we are using have such big batch when they're made. So we should not be compelled to do everyday testing, but we do, because that's who we are, and that's what we believe is correct for you in terms of hobbyists, for the public aquarium that are using us, for the aquaculture people that are using our salt. We need to be sure. And also we take the samples that we use for the test, then we keep it in stock. So we have 10 years of samples in our warehouse. So if I remember one time we had an issue with a public aquarium, they said the salt was bad and killed some sharks, and we said it's not possible. Well, we proved them that our salt, that the batch number they receive was not the one that causes the problem. And because we had the batch and because we were able to send it to an independent lab, and that's how we get out with it. And they still buy our products for now because they said it's the best one available.
Yeah. So there's the take-home message is there's a lot of skill and science and just manufacturing experience. I know your dad is custom built or helped custom design some of the equipment that can only be found in your facility so that the salt is treated, processed, mixed, bagged in the best possible way.
Yeah. It's not, you have to understand, it's not, we don't mix bucket per bucket, because that sometimes people tell us, oh, you forget to put the calcium in the bucket. No, folks,
No.
it's not the way it works. So when we make a batch, one batch, just one mix is almost 700 kilograms. So that's one batch.
Yeah,
and then we
nearly
repeat
2,000 pounds.
Yeah, and we repeat this several times a day, so that we know the quality of the products. And we have promoted, and we look sometimes, for the funny fact. And I have a fun fact. So if you took a samples of salt of 20 grams, you will have all the elements that are in the full bucket. So you will have all the elements. What we claim on the bucket, for example, of Reef Evolution, if you take a sample of 20 grams, you will find everything in it.
Yeah, there's top to bottom, January to December. It's consistent.
It's consistent, yeah.
So Dale, we
advise to make to use the full doses of salt. That's usually what we claim, because then we know there is no external pollution, because every time you're going to open the lids of your bucket or you're going to open the lids of your pot, potentially you can have pollution getting in. Maybe not from you, maybe it's going to be your kids, maybe it's going to be your cat or your dog, whatever. And that's why we advise, we try to buy a packaging of salt that is going to be used in one go. And that's why everyone advised to do so, but not everyone does.
Yeah. Well, that's also, though, we're introducing the small canister that holds, what is it?
400 grams.
400 grams. So, yeah. So if you have a small system, you can get the small canister. There's another canister that holds almost 3 pounds. Yeah. Later on, we're going to be introducing a 50-gallon bucket. And then we have the 150-gallon box that has 10 bags. Each bag makes 15 gallons. And then the traditional 200-gallon box where there's 4 bags and each bag makes 50 gallons. So, and it's price competitive, and be smart about that, because you don't want your salt sitting around for long periods of time. And if you've got a small system, the nano tanks, I mean, the shows lately, there's some guy walking around with a saltwater tank right on his chest. It's
I saw the photo.
Yes.
That's not even a nano anymore. That's pico or even smaller.
Yeah, I don't know. It's strange, but but then what are the common questions? I mean, you talked about, we get a few questions regularly about salt. What are the?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, some of the questions we get back through social media is how fast does it dissolve? I mean, we spoke about that one because of the way it's grounded and blended together, super fast. Should use it within 5 minutes. But does it need to be heated for the salt?
You mean the water?
Yes.
No, you can use room temperature is fine. Of course, if the water is freezing cold, it might be a little bit slower, but it's not going to have a big influence. But you don't need to put a aquarium heater in your mixing tank. You don't. Just have the room temperature, or if you want to keep the same temperature as your tank so you can make the water change straight away, that's fine.
Well, what do you recommend? Because you say, it's common here to have a 33-gallon or 50-gallon trash can that's dedicated just for mixing salt. But you have a pump, like an MX pump in the bottom with a hose that then brings it up and recirculates that. that's an easy, quick way to do that, is just to use, one of the MX pumps. Yep.
Yeah, it's
Yep.
what it's
And then
what I do.
take that pump
I
and
have
put it straight into the aquarium. Sorry.
luckily we make pumps as well, so I use a DC pump, because then I use this pump to pull to push the water in the final tank, and I put an aquarium heater as well in it. But because I want to have no thermal shock between my tank and the water change. But that's it.
Yeah.
So a couple of questions we got asked. This is the very simple one. Can I use the salt if it's gone hard? And we spoke about the different sizes that we kind of make it in. But if the bag has been opened and the salt's gone hard, can they still use it?
So the quick answer is yes. The longer answer is yes, you can use it. It might
Yes.
might need a little bit more time to reach the pH. It might, because it takes more time to dissolve. So it might take a little bit more time to dissolve and to reach the pH. And I would say that because you get some humidity, it becomes hard. Yeah, it becomes hard. I would say that maybe the vitamins that are inside the salt are being oxidized and you're not going to get the benefits. But it makes no harm.
Okay, so another one. What's the collaboration between Dr. Tim's and ASF? I asked because I saw it said on the bucket, recommended by Dr. Tim's.
Tim, you want to answer or you want me to answer?
Well, I can say, so we started 10 years ago. It's been a while working. We make bacteria for that products for Europe, and then that's gone into well, how to make a better salt. Can we add the bacteria? What types of bacteria? And Dr. Tim's our bacteria specialist, and ASF our salt specialist. So it's kind of like that Reese's Buttercup. Put the chocolate with the peanut butter. You put the bacteria with the salt.
That's
We can't have a food analogy? How about some
not
wine?
Reese's. Oh, no.
No?
Okay. So now that explains it. Okay, so
Yeah. Cadbury.
What do you recommend for water changing? I have a 100-gallon reef tank. How much water should I remove and replace weekly, fortnightly? Please advise.
That's a
again. You want an easy one or you want a
no? Go on. Time's getting on. Just give me an easy one.
10% a week.
Yeah.
You agree, Tim?
Yeah, and don't believe those people that said, "Oh, I've had my tank for 5 years and I've never changed water."
No, it's not true.
No, it's
Okay,
not true.
so
My dad was making a drop by drop water change.
Drop by drop.
Continuously, drop by drop.
Wow, I ain't got time for that.
That's how we managed to get good water quality.
That's the German heritage.
Yeah, I have a fish only tank. Can I switch to Reef Evolution?
Yes.
Oh, easy. Yeah.
Easy, yeah.
Not a problem at all. And your fish might start looking a little bit better and a little more colorful. I mean, not that they eat bacteria, but the reef crystals is, as your sales guy said, it's alive. They're swimming in this water, and it shouldn't be sterile. It makes a difference. Yeah.
I'm using a different brand of salt. Can I switch to Reef Evolution, or would there be a problem in my aquarium? And these are consumer questions.
Yes, you can switch. But please bear this in mind. Please clean your mixing tank before switching salt.
Yeah.
And the reason why
always good advice.
Yeah, I think that's very important. You should clean your mixing tank and the pumps that you use every quarter at least. Because when you use a salt that has buffers, good buffers, so that means carbonate, bicarbonate, if you don't do it, you might have precipitate, as we talked before. So please bear this in mind. That's it.
So I am new to the hobby. I have a brand new aquarium about to set up. Can I use Reef Evolution from the beginning?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And don't forget the Dr. Tim's one and only live nitrifying bacteria.
I like what you did there. Nice. Yes, that's very good. Well, no, because obviously we spoke about salts that have got enriched levels, and if the tank is brand new, you don't need to have those higher levels of magnesium and calcium because you've got nothing in there that's going to be using it. So it's a fair question. If Reef Evolution has got lots of elements in there, can I use this from the start, or is that going to feed a problem of nitrates and phosphates?
It will be beneficial for the bacteria in any way.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. And there are no nitrates and phosphates and ammonia in Reef Evolution. And you just start the tank out right. It's using a cheaper salt, then you risk contamination. And, you know, things can go south. So don't try to save money by skipping. You're not saving that much money, and you're big.
Once you have the problems, you don't save any money.
It's a fight to get it back. Last question for a consumer. On the back of the box, there's a table, and we mentioned this earlier, and it says that there's a difference between LPS and SPS. Can you please explain what these are?
I mean, between the short polyp corals and the long polyp corals.
Call them corals, yeah. Well, this is the splitters or the lumpers almost. It's kind of like fish, but Thomas, you go ahead. Sorry.
Well, but basically the long polyp most of the time have a skeleton which is harder, so need more calcium, so you have higher levels.
So you add more salt. As you said, math earlier, add more salt, get more calcium. Add more salt, get more magnesium. Hence why they're at a different level on the table. You need to add more salt in to achieve the higher calcium level for SPS rather than lower salt level.
That's when you want to create. That's when you want to overthink. So we need to answer people that wants to overthink. But if you keep your seawater in your tank at between 33 to 35 parts per thousand, you will be fine. Whatever, you will be fine. Yeah. Make your water test, of course, because this is still a necessity, but you will be fine.
Right. I mean, if you've got your whole aquarium top to bottom, left to right, with huge amounts of stony, the corals that are just growing like crazy, but that's not a lot of people. Don't concentrate on quality, not quantity. Keep the corals healthy, keep the colors up. And what I always say is don't let the tank take over your life. Enjoy it. That's what the whole purpose of this hobby is to enjoy it, not to turn it into work.
Yeah, it's to look at your tank and enjoy your tank. I agree, 100%. Some people like to play the chemist or like to the technical part of the aquariums, but
yes, we get them. Yeah, they're now microbial ecologists, but that's a whole nother story. So, all right, Thomas, thank you very much for that in-depth discussion. Any questions people have, please hit us up on social media, and we'll include those, and we'll do a full session on question and answers for salt. But again, thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Dale. And this has been Dr. Tim's Aquatics Podcast. Good fish keeping, everybody.